Hi,
Thanks, Ben.
good morning.
Great to see you. Great to see you. Listen, we've got lots to dig into here today on this topic. So I'm going to hand over to you in just a moment, and we'll hopefully leave some time for some questions towards the end of the session as well. Just a super quick question from me. Really, I've been asking all of our speakers this all week, just to get a variety of answers, as wide a spread of answers as I can. But really, all about, I guess, what the last couple of years have meant in terms of your organisation. What's been the biggest or most dramatic shift or change you have seen over that time period? Casey, perhaps I can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest shifts that we've seen is sort of what we're talking about today, and that's the reason that we're talking about it, which is the shift from, we've traditionally operated in the content marketing space, and for a while now, content marketing has expanded and content has expanded to it's really encompass everything and every type of asset that you're creating. And then with the recent shift in focus on, customer experience and the digital experience in particular, that's taken on a whole new shape and form to where now we're not just having conversations about, content and content creation, but content placement, content staging, content merchandising. And we see, marketers, and we've engineered our services and our strategies to accommodate this increasing ownership over more layers of the customer experience that didn't exist before. So I would say that's one of the biggest things that we've seen change in our business and the industry.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating couple of years for sure. Dan, how about yourself? Anything to add there about a different take?
Yeah, I think here content was largely viewed as helping with tactics. So, people were thinking about acquisition or SEO or channel performance. And, what we've seen is the kind of term marketing starting to dissolve and think of content as the broader customer experience. So, this should touch every digital interaction, and everything should build off of one another. So you can't have, certain teams chasing tactics with content over here and other teams over there, and then the customer is kind of yanked in different directions and getting multiple messages or disparate experiences. So, this idea of building connected ecosystems that are foundational to the entire digital experience and connected, not chasing tactics for things like channel performance or acquisition. Those things happen, but they happen at a much greater acceleration and scale if you connect everything together.
Yeah, love it. I know that's what you're going to be talking about today, this idea of orchestrating that piece. So at this point, why don't I hand over to you? We get some slides up that you're going to walk us through. So you should see those appearing shortly. I will hand over to you folks. I'll be back to facilitate some questions towards the end of the session. But for now, Dan and Casey, it's over to you.
Thanks, Ben.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll kick us off. Good morning, everyone. So as mentioned, Dan and I are here to really help you craft brand experiences that make your customers want to buy. And we do that through the content experience framework that we're going to share with you today. And it's a framework based on actual buyer research, as mentioned, that we at Skyward conducted. And you're going to be able to use this to assess your content experience today and really determine how you're stacking up to your buyer's primary experience needs and preferences, so that you have that foundation to then build forward from. So to start us off, I want to ground us a little bit and spend a second talking about what's changed since the pandemic that should really prompt you to think about your content experience maybe a little differently. So first being digital primacy is real, right? Like you may have seen this stat from McKinsey before. They estimated that digital adoption leapt forward 10 years within the first 3 months of the pandemic. So, we all live this boom, we're on lockdown, out of necessity, purchasing shifts online, and you're stuck as a marketer, at least for the short term, sort of serving customers through whatever digital experience you had in place at the time. And if your brand wasn't ready for it, you likely lost customers to your competitors who were. And the reality is that 2 years later, many brands are still playing catch up. But it's clear that this purchase behavior is really here to stay, and that digital is going to remain a primary growth channel that brands need to focus on. Now, at the same time, your customers are saying that they view your brand experience as an extension of your products. So I love this stat. 88% of consumers say the experience you provide is as important to them as your products and services. as important as your products and services. So that's huge. And third, customer research tells us that the key driver of purchase decisions isn't brand love anymore, it's customer agency. So what's more important than how customers feel about your brand is how much you're empowering them to control their own experience. So if you just think back a minute to your own, experience during the pandemic, you were probably shopping online, and it didn't take long for your priorities and your loyalty to sort of shift from the brands maybe you used to go to first to the ones that could make the experience as simple and seamless for you as possible. And so just keep in mind that over the last couple of years, your customers have really done the same thing. They've basically perfected the art of navigating the digital world to get the information they need as quickly and efficiently as possible. And they know what they're looking for. And the most important thing that you can do is really just empower them in that process. So critical things to remember here are digital first experiences are really table stakes. The experience you provide and how you communicate is as important as your solutions and services. And your branding is not as important as the power that you give to your customers. So, we saw this happening at Skyward. We're coaching clients through it. And as a company that specializes in content strategy and content creation for brands, we're pretty obsessed with understanding how content's driving brand growth and what's disrupting the marketing paradigm. So all of this left us with a big question mark, which is, what role does content play in this new world, in the new customer experience? And it's not an easy question to answer necessarily. So we went straight to the source. We asked buyers. So we surveyed over 1,100 consumers and over 300 qualified business decision makers early this year. And it's the insights from that study that inform the framework that we use today. So I want to share what we discovered. So first, the study validated that there are really three critical ways that content impacts purchase decisions. And number one is content supports self-directed behavior. So it's how you put power in your customers' hands. Content is how they discover your brand. It's how they research what you do. It's how they gauge how you stack up to competitors. It's what's giving them that agency that they want to have. And number two, content demonstrates value. So, we know information is value. And when presented in certain ways, it's also used by customers as a proxy to gauge the likely value of your products and services. So remember, your experience as important as the products and services. And then number three, content is what's giving your experience technology its potency. So, you can have the best tech stack in the world, but it's not going to move the needle without the right content, the right scale to bring it to life and activate the insights that you're getting from that technology in the right ways. So I want to shift now into the buyer's head for a minute. So, we aggregate the feedback from customers, and what they're actually looking for from brand experiences is, in summary, this. So what your customers are saying is, I want helpful information that's tailored to me and my needs. I do not want to be told what to do or feel pushed to do something. I want to make up my own mind, and I want to feel good about that decision. I want to buy from your brand feeling confident that I'm going to get the value that I was looking for. And this seems really simple and obvious, but think for a second about, is this your content, how your content is making your customers feel today? Is this the kind of experience that your marketing is actually laser focused on facilitating, or is it a lot of other tactics and strategies that sort of pulling you away from this core need? If so, great. If not, here's what you need to be considering to get there. So this is our content experience index, the framework I've been talking about. So it's made up of 7 interdependent markers that holistically characterize a best-in-class content experience. So one that meets modern customer needs and builds brand preference in that process. And I know this is a lot, so I'm going to go through each of these elements individually. And I encourage you, as I do that, to make note of whether or not your brand is meeting the criteria I'm talking about and see kind of how you net out at the end. So the first thing we look at is what we call content presence. So this encompasses the prominence and the placement of your content. So fundamentally, is the information your customers need throughout the purchase journey accessible in the places they need or expect it to be? So in looking at this, some questions to ask yourself are, could a customer navigate virtually the entire decision-making process with your brand, with the content that you've made available to them and no other intervention from sales or otherwise? Or are they going to get to certain points and then hit a dead end and then get to another point and hit another dead end? Are you making original informative content available to them on the platforms and channels that they're most likely to use? And are you publishing consistently enough to maintain your visibility and your currency in those platforms and channels? We can move on to helpfulness. So you might be familiar with the quote, "Don't sell to your customers, help them buy." And that's really what we're talking about here. So helpfulness is the degree to which you're providing the specific types of information that your customers look for when making their purchase decisions. And so our research revealed that consumers and business buyers both look at these four types of content as really essential. So first, clear and thorough answers to their frequently asked questions. Second, unbiased information on the market that helps them make sense of the various solutions available to them. So independent of your solution, compare your solution to competitors as well. Content that explains and ideally that shows exactly how your products or services work and how they differ from similar offerings. And then content that confirms that your solutions have delivered positive results for people like them. So this doesn't mean that other types of information aren't helpful, but we're talking about content that really falls at the intersection of help and purchase utility, right? That's essential. All right, next I want to go into connectivity. So is your content connecting the dots for your customers? So as they build their intention to purchase, are you allowing, and even better, are you encouraging those connections and those next steps to happen? So my husband actually mentioned, an experience he had that reminded me of this the other day. And he was researching camping trailers to rent and tow behind the pickup for a trip that we were taking to a national park. And so he'd never towed anything like that before. He was looking for information on how, the whole camping trailer thing works, and where he needed to buy. So he came across two competing camper rental sites on his phone. And one had kind of a tips and tricks resources section. So he kind of scrolled to that. The first thing he sees is a blog post about how to empty the gray water tank on the camping trailer. So if you don't know, that's, the shower water. Handy information, but not really the first thing that a first-time renter is really going to be wondering about. And then there were a bunch of other blogs covering similar topics, and you kind of click through those. And then on the other site, there was this reel of posts from previous renters about how to make your camping trip the most memorable experience of your life. And there were beautiful pictures, and there were links to the gear and everything that they brought along. And then below that was a series of step-by-step posts on how to think about renting a camping trailer. And it walked him through how to pick out his model, how to know which trailer hitch he needed, all the way to how to empty the gray water tank. So you can probably guess who he ended up renting from. But he told me after, and I swear this was unprompted, he told me it felt like the first company was selling him trailers, and then the second company was helping him make sure that we had a great trip. And so it struck me as a very basic example, but I think it captures the power that being intentional about how you plan and connect content has. So it can actually ease and even elevate the customer experience to something more memorable. So as you consider, your content's connectivity, how your assets are strategically linked together, ask yourself, are you just spreading content around and asking your customer to make cognitive leaps or work to find what they need? Or are you staging information really intentionally in a way that removes steps, combines steps, or removes friction that keeps them connected to their end goal or aspiration throughout the entire process? Now, next up is relevance. So here you really want to consider the degree to which your content aligns with customers who have distinct needs, interests, and challenges. So the primary challenge that customers reported to us in the research was the difficulty of finding the information and solutions that a brand offers that are relevant to them. And one of their primary frustrations was being targeted with what they see as irrelevant information outside of the brand experience. So think about how you've paved the way for a tailored experience for customers in different, key customer segments. Do you align your content to the needs of specific segments or industries or challenge areas? And when those buyers engage with you, is all the rest of the information they don't need filtered out for them? So if you're not in a position to use, personalization technology to create dynamically curated experiences on your website, at least make sure you're making it easy for customers to find their stream, with good navigation, with good filtering or a microsite strategy, and then have all of the content to take them through that full tailored journey and back that up. Right, and then I want to move into authority. So is your content establishing you as an authority in your specific solutions areas? And by that, I mean, are you maintaining sort of laser focus on the topics where you have the right to play? Or are you trying to cover so many topics that you come off as, a master of none at the end of the day? So this is really important because content authority is the factor a majority of both consumers and business buyers told us had heavily influenced their decision to purchase from one brand versus another. The authority of the content from one brand versus the competitor that they were looking at. And it's particularly key to helping build that purchase confidence that they're seeking, because it's signaling to your customers that yes, you are actually well-versed in the areas that they expect you to be expert in. And authority is built really systematically and intentionally from a content perspective. So you need to be constantly creating content that aligns to your core topic pillars, carrying that through every stage of the customer journey, and at the same time using every opportunity to affiliate your brand with external subject matter experts and elevating the voices of your own internal subject matter experts in those specific areas. And then differentiation. So this is the degree to which your content is perceived as uniquely valuable and differentiated. So in most buyers' minds, differentiation and rarity are similar to authority, really key indicators of product and brand quality. So the more that you can establish differentiation early in the purchase process, the more likely you are to have built up that buyer preference that leads to an actual conversion. So be really critical about assessing how the substance of your content stands out from similar information that can be found elsewhere. How your brand tone and the look and feel of your content is reinforcing your brand differentiation. And then beyond the basics, sort of what content series or data or research do you offer that's really rare and proprietary to sweeten the deal. And the last element here is community. So does your content demonstrate that you've built or that you meaningfully support a community your customers identify with and want to join? And this quality is really a multiplier for the experience. So as humans, we crave belonging and connectedness, and the brands that appeal and sort of tap into that tribal instinct are really more likely to earn preference and endorsements from buyers than those who don't. So consider, are you using content to nurture a community that your passive visitors can join and subscribe to and feel compelled to do that? And is content used to engage that community, to facilitate interaction between community members, or even more elevated to educate community members in an exclusive way? So to recap really quickly, what you want to build up is presence in the places where your customers are seeking out the solutions that you provide, helpfulness with the information that specifically helps your customers buy, authority in the specific areas your brand solutions are focused and where your brand has a right to play, connectivity that enables a seamless progression through the journey, differentiation that reinforces your value, relevance that cuts out the noise for customers with specific needs and interests, and a community that your customers are really going to feel proud and compelled to join. So I know that's a lot. As you can see from this, actual visual of the assessment results from a brand, it's important to note that few brands are actually operating at full throttle in all of these areas at once. But the beauty of a framework like this, to me, is the ability to look at all these dimensions of your experience holistically. And when you do that, it becomes much more clear where your biggest gaps and your lowest hanging fruit are. So we often help brands identify one or two areas of focus to improve on first. And then as you build up that marketing muscle and operationalize in those areas, you have a solid foundation to tackle the next area and the next with more concerted focus. So I'm going to pass it over to Dan, and he's going to take you through how some actual brands are applying these principles and the specific steps that they're taking to sort of recalibrate their content experience efforts.
Thanks, Casey. So really the amazing part about this is this framework that Casey described is it can literally be applied to, any client, any situation, kind of meet you like where you are, and then help build a really deliberate roadmap to reduce friction from the buying experience and hit your growth objectives, which we all are trying to do. Before we get into the examples, 3 key principles. So the first, which Casey hit, and is the whole basis for this, which is approach everything with the buyer mindset, not the seller mindset. And Casey gave a great example with the camper experience there with her husband. But really thinking through, how do we craft this with the buyer experience in mind, not how do we find where consumers are and push our marketing messages at them, like help them buy. The second is start where it's most strategic for you. So every organization and marketing team is different. You have specific objectives, you have specific strengths and weaknesses. So, looking at that, the entire paradigm here is overwhelming. So, start to pick your spots and then build on those over time. And then the third is don't let third parties or competitors shape and educate your market, right? So Sanai said it really well, probably better than that, which is be the brand that owns the process. I love that. So, as you're thinking through all of these roles, it's educating, it's engaging, it's experience creation, and it's frictionless buying and self-directed experiences as well. So how does the kind of rubber hit the road here? Couple examples. This is Korn Ferry. If you're unfamiliar with Korn Ferry, they're a global consulting firm really focused on things like executive placement, organizational design, and really putting people in organizations in a position to be extra effective or transformative when they're looking to expand within their market. No surprise, kind of how you run and manage a business today is far different than a couple of years ago. Ben mentioned that at the outset. All kinds of things that we have to think about, and that list just keeps growing, right? So there's no shortage of things that Korn Ferry has to talk about, but they can't just talk. They have to differentiate and they have to connect with their audience in meaningful ways. So what they did, which was really, really inspiring, is went all in on a voice and tone as a core strategy. So they call it being like radically human and provocative and approaching topics and themes in a deeply personal way that connects with executives and kind of tosses out that academic speak and theories and builds really kind of strong positions and perspectives to understand the world and their role in it and how they drive impact. They created a physical magazine, which you can see here. It can be found in newsstands and airports and online where executives are, or at least used to be, where I used to be, and have a huge and growing audience. But the challenge was as they continued to expand that audience, it was that thought leadership angle, that education angle, but they needed to connect it back into the business, the products, solutions, in ways that, as Casey said, help people buy, right? So here you're seeing aspects of that. So as they look at the framework here, starting to get really deliberate about helping people understand tactics and vision for the world around them. So, where are you on your DE&I journey? Brian had a great question on SMEs, like how do you create a platform for your experts to be out in the world shaping your market position on really important elements? Are you ghostwriting for them? Are there videos? Are they included in webinars? Are they featured in content so that your view is in this case, there's a human angle to their strategy. As they started to not only build that upper band thought leadership education, but tying it directly back in, not only does it help accelerate conversion, but it shapes people's mindset. So they're building the best. Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry. So we talked about B2B and how this can play out. So now we can go the total opposite and look at sunscreen, right? So how does this play out with a consumer product? So Elta MD, as an example, had a really enviable position. So they were present physically in dermatologist offices. That's how they went to market. And you would go in and you'd talk to your doctor or your dermatologist, and they would say, oh, here's your issue, here's a product, right? So, really strong position, but largely not scalable, right? So you fast forward, and they got acquired by Colgate-Palmolive, and Colgate saw the opportunity to scale their market position and really help them go direct to consumer much faster. So it was really important for Elta MD to not just go to the market at scale, but also retain their position of authority within the dermatologist community. So instead of having people go to the dermatologist, they said, what if we had the dermatologist come to the people, right? So starting to look at all the questions around skincare, there's lots of ways to extract those. Search is one of them. And understanding elements of how skin in the sun affects skin tones and skin conditions, and having that content be produced by experts that their audience trusts. So here on the right, you're seeing contributors that are actually practicing dermatologists. An example on the bottom left, Dr. Jenny Liu. She has an Instagram handle, is a micro-influencer. It's called Derm Talk. She has 200,000 followers and is also creating and sharing content out. And not only, are they creating content for their kind of central hub, but they're building and sharing that content where people are and creating a shared relationship across multiple platforms. So whether people experience the brand on social, through email, on their website, physical locations, it's all consistent, all high value, and it's finding ways to make it easier for people to purchase products by putting it in context of their life and their interests. Even as they're onboarding influencers into the brand, not only do they send them product, but they also send them content. So how do they immerse them in the brand, the position, and the vision for where they see everything going. So, lots of other applications here with B2B, as you can imagine, industry marketing. If we think through relevance on how do you adapt your content for emerging audiences and in lots of different interesting and creative ways, which we can talk about at length. If you know me, I can talk about this stuff for days. So, but kind of the headline here is, as Casey mentioned, as you're sketching out where you fall within all of these points, we'll send you materials that help you self-assess. But if you need help, not only understanding your maturity, what you can do, but if you need help building it out, we're happy to to help play a role there. But we'll pause here, and thanks for the attention, and we'll answer any questions you guys have.
Great, thanks Dan, thanks Casey for getting us through it. Some really great points there. Love the research. Some really interesting points made, and I want to dig into some of those areas a little bit further with you both. Also, of course, welcome questions from the floor here. So if you do have questions for Dan or Casey on anything that was discussed just there, please do let us know. I want to dive first of all into this idea of where to prioritize. We've been talking about this a couple of times already this week about where to focus your efforts. And, you know, I guess the thing about a 7-step framework is that there's lots to work on. Where would you recommend folks get started in this effort? Dan, maybe I'll start with you this time if I can.
Sure. I think largely it's based on what you have in place today and what your objectives are. So, you know, some folks go immediately out to try to build a community. With B2B, that may be less important, and you need to think through, you know, how do I have, you know, in an example, we didn't talk to Samsung B2B, how do I tell our industry story, build a platform for SMEs, and understand, you know, the buyer challenges and opportunities within those sets, and make it really easy to show how our product can play a role in that future state solution, creating buying opportunities and smart buyers. So, you know, part of it is an assessment of where you are, and then what are the immediate opportunities in the next 6 to 12 months? And then how do I then look at my priorities over the next, you know, couple years and start to say, okay, these things are important. These things can be phase 2. But there's you know, you have the kind of holistic framework here for everything, but not every brand can do everything. It's overwhelming and you do nothing particularly well. So I think it's that, you know, self-reflection, looking at your goals, looking at your plans, and then prioritizing accordingly.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Casey, let's come to you with some thoughts on that. Some good tips there from Dan. Where have you seen organisations see success in terms of where to get started, what to pick first?
Yeah, so I agree with everything Dan said in terms of like thinking about your objectives, looking at things holistically, and then seeing, you know, where your big payoff moments are going to be, where you need to double down just as a start, and what you can kind of save for later. But I think something, you know, there's some foundational work that's sort of implied within this framework, which is, you know, having a solid understanding of your customer and having mapped out your customer journey, not just the journey itself broadly, but the macro and the micro, you know, helping moments throughout that journey that you have an opportunity to influence. That as you're thinking about content, you think about, where is this, you know, micro moment going to most likely occur? What's the content I need, you know, to send to that area? And then another thing is your customer segmentation, just general understanding of customer needs and how those connect. If you have the Venn diagram, right, the topics and that relate to your brand solutions and what your brand is an expert in, versus the things that your customers need from you and want from you and are interested in themselves, where those areas intersect, those need to inform your content pillar strategy, as we refer to it, so that, you know, you've got these discrete areas of focus that you need to own and build ownership of with your content. And so you're immediately, you know, focusing in on those areas and building out a really systematic content library that you can use and distribute in a million different ways, rather than, you know, hunting and pecking and sort of, you know, just saying like, okay, we're going to chase this search topic, you know, this week in an editorial calendar around this sounds good, you know, or sales said they want to, you know, need a blog post about this, or we need a video about this. Instead of taking orders, you really want to be in much more control over that process. And so that kind of, you know, topic pillar infrastructure is really helpful and foundational to be able to build, you know, some of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Casey. One of the things that really resonated with me, that I think you both touched on, is the multidisciplinary nature of a lot of this work. I think, Dan, you touched on it right at the start, this idea that actually content is about much more than just driving a transaction. It's about that entire customer experience. It suggests it requires input from multiple different teams, multidisciplinary teams. So how are you seeing firms coordinate that effort to actually kind of, you know, bring all those different functions together in order to deliver a holistic experience?
Yeah, I think it's a lot, right? So as you look at how marketing has typically been set up and marketing teams have been set up, it's very tactic oriented. Same thing with business units. If you're in a larger enterprise, everything is set up with functions and attributes or measurement for those specific functions. So we're actually like set up in a way that is opposite of how you create a unified content and customer experience. So some of this requires collaboration, and then some of it also requires, reimagining how those resources play out that you have on your teams. So, do you have like a managing editor, or do you have people that do you have an editorial board where, folks from different BUs or functional areas can get together on a regular basis and collaborate and say, like, let's look at everybody's calendars and how do we create momentum in what we call like the big wins, the big momentum versus the small wins, which is like, hey, did this asset do well or did this campaign do well? The bigger question is our company doing well? Like, are we achieving the momentum that we're looking for in market? So that requires a mindset shift, not only in the way you approach content, as Casey talked about, but also we're talking to a lot of people about how you structure your teams and how you can do that effectively to take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Casey, I guess what kind of skill sets and capabilities are we looking for when we're looking to build out these teams, not just within marketing, but actually across the wider business as well, bring them involved?
Yeah, I think, that what we're seeing more and more of, which has been really necessary and obviously is very, close to what we do, are content people, people with content or editorial or media or publishing backgrounds really coming into key roles as, let's say, a head of content or, a chief content officer role being created, and having someone with that sort of background and expertise of content strategy there within your brand, rather than sort of outsourcing that completely to an agency, because that's tends to be something that you really want to be able to control and be able to have someone, head up and identify the initiatives and strategies that you need to go after, and then bring those key stakeholders together. So, obviously another key competency area is sort of, CX and UX, right? So I think a lot of people are trying to upskill their teams right now to become more experts in sort of, digital journey mapping and customer experience. But that if that is a separate team within your organization, those bridges really need to be built, because a lot of brands that we encounter have a marketing team who's creating content, and then sort of a team in charge of digital or the digital experience who takes that content and places it on behalf of the brand. And that may not include input necessarily from marketing, which is just kind of like wild to me. So marketing really needs to be, in my opinion, in control of that, end experience, not just like pumping the content and the fuel into the pipes. So having that sort of understanding and knowledge and shared lexicon with that, dev or CX team is becoming more critical as well. And then there's just sort of the ongoing data analytics skill set that's really nice to have, so that you're able to use all of the tools that are available these days to get really real time, we call them fast data insights, audience insights, so that you're constantly remaining in tune with what it is that your customers are looking for, where they're moving, where they're shopping, and staying on top of that, at all times. Having that knowledge internally is really helpful as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Casey. A question come through on the chat here, and it perhaps builds on the conversation we were having yesterday about the growth triple play, this idea of bringing creativity and analytics and purpose together. What are the biggest data challenges you're seeing in the space, and any tips or tricks so that we connect the details to the bigger picture? Casey, perhaps I can start with you on that one.
Yeah, so I think, it's probably been mentioned many times before that the constant chorus is attribution, right? I think for marketing, attribution tends to be that key from an data analytics standpoint, tends to be that key challenge of, how are we tying sales back to content influence or content touch points? And so, if you're able to do that, it's really valuable. But I think that there are other, data points that you can be gathering and looking at as you set up your projects and your objectives. For instance, measuring the sales cycle, right? How is your content helping to, shorten that sales cycle? So beyond just saying like, we've got, we generated this much traffic, we generated this many clicks, what are those other meaningful ways that content is measurably influencing the entire, business and sales process that you can be measuring to show the impact of content and the work that you're doing on CX. So another is also, operations focused, right? Like budgets are tight. So any way that you can talk about, and collect data on your production process, so the number of assets you're creating, and then how you're saving money by being smart about how you repurpose and reuse assets. There are definitely ways that you can track in content creation technology these days, like how many assets you are creating out of one, core flagship asset, and keep track of that. How many times an asset has been used or published or distributed, and keep track of that. And that's all helping to sort of, make the case for savings and efficiency results.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. Thanks, Casey. Casey, Dan, that is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for providing your thoughts, some fascinating insights, and a great framework for people to take away some good practical advice in there. Many thanks both, and a pleasure talking to you. You take care.
Thanks.